Jon Summers is the motoring historian. He was a company car thrashing technology sales rep that turned into a fairly inept sports bike rider. Hailing from California, he collects cars and bikes built with plenty of cheap and fast, and not much reliable. On his show, he gets together with various co hosts to talk about new and old cars, driving, motorbikes, motor racing, and motoring travel.
All right. Well, good day, good afternoon, good morning, whatever time of day it might be for you. It's Jon Summers, the motoring historian, with Mark Gammy. Mark, go ahead and introduce yourself. Last time I forgot to ask you to introduce yourself.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I suppose I work in sales for my sins, which must have been manifold.
No, I just meant say hello.
Hello.
It's funny though you work in sales, because in the little blurb that I wrote, that was actually one of the things that I mentioned that you and I had in common, and which I feel like it defines our approach to motoring: the abuse of company cars in our 20s.
Repping the repping. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
So look, we did Goodwood, didn't we? I had a lot of things on my list here. We did Goodwood, didn't we? That seems like a long time ago.
It does.
I mean, you remember a Goodwood. You go often.
Mm.
Tell me what you remember specifically about that particular Festival of Speed that we went to.
Well, I mean, I think the emotional highlight has got to be Wayne Rainey going up the hill, hasn't it? I mean, it's difficult to argue with that. I took a screen cap of him on the following day when I was watching a bit of the live stream, but seeing him go up there, seeing the guys from Yamaha and so forth over there helping him out and stuff, that was awesome. What about you? What was your highlights?
I felt it was great that we went on the Thursday, and we literally stumbled into the grandstand and sat there being like, it's nice to have a rest. It was raining a little bit, wasn't it? And then we were like, oh, there's some motorcycle people down there. And then you were like, oh, is that Kevin Schwantz? And then you were like, oh, is that dude in the wheelchair, Rainey? And it just sort of happened organically, didn't it? So that was a really special thing. Of course, I guess you probably saw the film of it. How Rainey wheelied the bike other days. So on our day, he didn't do that, did he? But a lot of the film on YouTube, it says first time riding in however many years it was. We actually saw it. We actually saw him chatting with Schwantz and Roberts in the moments before.
But yeah, 50 years of M car, that was good. Lots of stuff there, some cracking 2002s and stuff. So yeah,
the sculpture was awesome, and I had the little die cast of the 3-litre CSL, and I could take a photo of it by the real 3-litre CSL. So that was cool. I mean, you asked me about what I thought the highlights were. So I enjoy most the bits where you can walk in the paddock and get really close. I enjoy doing that at the end of the day or early in the morning, i.e. when there's not a lot of people around and when maybe a lot of the cars aren't even there. So when there's that sports racing Ferrari there, you can take 10 minutes being like, God damn, the lines on this car are perfect. And then sit there looking at where it's redlined thinking, this is a sports bike like piece of kit in terms of how it would be to use. And I just, I always think with them, I always find myself, I look for details, right? That a lot of those sports racing Ferraris that we used for long races like Le Mans and the Carrera Panamericana or even the Mille Miglia, they might have like 40 or 50 gallon gas tanks that were out behind the rear axle. So imagine you start the race with a full tank of gas, so the car handles one way. As the tank empties, the car handles a different way. Then you get a full tank of gas. But now the car's knackered because you've done like from Brescia to Rome at racing speeds. Now the shock absorbers are knackered. Maybe the wheels a bit out of alignment. Now you've got a whole different car. But hey, it's got 4 tires that are like sports bike tires and about 400 horsepower. So, nothing to worry about there. So, yeah, and
That'll be fine.
this is right there is why I think sports racing Ferraris deserve their place as the most valuable cars. And every time I go to an event like Goodwood, I love looking at that. I also love that there were Taz Suzukis there. I love particularly that it was the same year of Taz Suzuki, 2005, as I have 2 examples of the little vents that year of the 05, 06 GSXRs have. The little vents makes them very distinctive. So it was cool to see, my bike's kind of a contemporary bike, even although it's 15 years old now, 17 years old. Yeah, cool to see that at Goodwood, and cool that whilst we were standing there, like stood 20 feet away from us, just chatted away, looking at, the modified Yam that old Rainey had ridden up the hill, was Steve Parrish. And neither of us noticed, or I didn't notice at least, we were busy enjoying the bikes as well. So that was...
Well, I took a photo of him, actually. I noticed him later. He was chatting to someone leaning on Guy Martin's Taiko Suzuki that he'd won. I can't remember. It wasn't he isn't one of the Isle of Man, but it was it might have been the Northwest 500, but it was one of those Northern Ireland road races that he'd done on it, and just elbow patches and being an enthusiast. And I think I said to you the other day, I don't know whether it's come from the Duke of Richmond or not, but when they interview them, you get like 1 or 2 questions on and that's it. I think the ethos very much seems to be everyone here is an enthusiast, so let everyone be an enthusiast. Don't bother anyone too much, even in the interviews. And so you get everyone being car people, which is nice to be for a bit. So what's his name? Mr. Le Mans was taking photos of the Auto Union, wasn't he? When he took photos of it.
Oh yeah. My moment of Instagram fame. Well, I won't say fame, but Instagram cheap thrill when Tom Christiansen likes my image of Tom Christiansen photographing the interior of the Auto Union D-Type Hill Climb Special that he was driving that weekend. And, say what you like about him. I mean, I happen to like him, but not that there's any reason why he shouldn't, but, I love the guy. But to see him having that enthusiasm was super cool.
Yeah, it's a cracking day out, and I would highly recommend it. And then, of course, we stumbled across Nige giving his lecture.
Birmingham's finest. Yeah, and just to rehash it, right, in my mind, the rain was thin, and I had a beer in my hand, and we were like, somehow I was on. It was like that moment in a concentration camp movie where the fence was between us, and you could go in, but I couldn't. There was that kind of moment going on, wasn't there? But
yeah,
but you got me beer, so it was all right. And then there was Nigel Mansell, like 50 feet away, talking like as if he was doing his best David Hobbs, like after dinner entertainer. But my word, was he the same old-fashioned, grouchy, point-scory bloke you would meet in a pub in Birmingham, right? He's like a bloke who you would meet in a pub in Birmingham. He's like the kind of bloke who, when you were selling tech products, would say he was going to buy it and then would say, oh, well, this happened and that happened and that happened. And you'd be sitting there listening to him, but you're going to get to the punchline in a minute. And that was why you're not going to buy it, stroke didn't win the race. He's like that, isn't he? It's like, yeah.
I mean, to be fair to him, I mean, you could cut him some slack, knocking PK, given some of the things PK said to him.
I thought it was,
but still,
yeah. I mean, yeah, I mean, PK's in the news, isn't he, with this being banned from the pit lane for this slur that he allegedly used or didn't use or translates in one way or another. or in another way. And but it's classic PK to be in hot water over that. And with PK, you've got to feel that he kind of knows what he's doing. Um, I think you know, nobody raced like Nigel Mansell, right? Maybe guys in the 50s like Sterling Moss, but nobody came through and like charged, as Murray Walker used to say, like Nigel Mansell did. And that's why the Italians called him the Lion, right? That he did have this lion heart in terms of racing. But I mean, you and I used to say at the time during his career, like often he had to do that because he'd made some mistake and hadn't qualified the car properly. And if I always came from in with the perspective of a Senna fan, and his up and downiness and the requirement to dig deep in the race, you were just like, dude, like if you just like set the car up properly and qualified well, you could have just driven off at the front and there wouldn't have needed to be any of the histrionics. But yeah. So anyway, it was fun seeing him. It
speak. Was fun. I mean, it was fun. It's because I support I was starting to think, why didn't I support Nigel? And I sort of did, but I was an Alesi fan in that time.
But that was why that was why Mansell Mania didn't grip you and me. I was reminded of that. Stood there because he was just too, like he was too much, of Britain can't do for me, it was,
It was quite something to see. The steering wheel got smaller, which meant that, you needed to have some upper body strength, which I had, but PK couldn't do it.
Patrese, my teammate.
Patrese,
but later on he said Patrese just to put that, Patrese, who I always remember some journalist in a piece about him saying, like, it was always hard to reconcile the hobby of having model trains with the 7-minute Nürburgring time. And this is always the thing about the Patrese character. The other thing that's interesting about Patrese is, of course, that lap he does of Jerez, which is somewhere knocking around on YouTube, where it's like the launch of a new car. And he goes out with his wife and she's just had dinner. And as they leave the pit lane, she's like, "You don't know this circuit, do you?" And he goes, "I know it very well." And that really tells, and he's got like some 200 horsepower front wheel drive car that he's going to do the lap in. And that depicts a different kind of side. There's Italian machismo there, which when, 10 years ago, when I used to use it in class to provoke discussion, we were in a different place from where we are now. I think now people would say that's abusive behavior. So I don't know, but yes, Patrese, a nice guy. So, we do have a little agenda here, don't we? A talking point here. So just to structure what we're doing. So if there could have been only one, what would you have taken from the show?
What car will I take away?
Yeah, if there could have been only one.
I don't know.
You can't sell it either. You can't sell it. You can't be like, I'd take that thing and sell it. You can't be like that. What would you?
No. Well, in which case it's tricky, isn't it? Because one implies that I would want to, have something I would use every day. In which case, I really struggle to look past like the Carrera GT. I love that. I wouldn't have that, and just drive it all the time. But I mean, some of the 330 Ferraris were they're just pornographically beautiful. There's all sorts of stuff there. I mean, there's just so much. It's really tricky. I mean, did you have a particular standout?
Yeah, whatever those sports racing Ferraris that we were looking at, there were a couple, and I would have been happy with both of them. I think one was a full body Testarossa. There was another one like 500 TRC or something. I could look on my phone, but I'm not that well prepared.
There was that brown Singer 911 as well that was just had a stance to die for.
Yeah, aren't they? I feel Singers are a little bit like Harleys. When I first moved to California, it was kind of still cool to have a Harley, but somewhere in the last 17 years, it's gone from being cool to being kind of like, really, like chest wig, really, you know, and that's fine. Culture can shift and change, but you know, I feel, yeah, yeah,
Yeah, I know where you're coming from. I mean, but that's the thing. They're still cool. Those are those alcoholics. Julia thing that I showed you a while back that I saw on I think on the Evo channel. It's just an astonishing piece of work. It's similar sort of repro, but it's you're paying a huge amount of money for those things, so they're not sort of real world for mere mortals.
I mean, I don't know. I read a really interesting book about the history of Mulholland Drive, and it's written by a bloke who, in order to win races up on Mulholland, went to Germany and basically had Porsche build him a Targa Florio spec 911 RSR that wasn't like it was like Targa Florio spec, but this was the car that was going to do the best Porsche Thor along Mulholland Drive based upon the specifications that he'd given them. And you know, so the concept of the 911 perfected, I do understand that. Just as I understand the coolness of the Harley thing, I just feel it's like a bit kind of done to death. Now that, you know, you'd, yeah, I don't know. Is it me a bit like not liking Guns N' Roses because everyone else liked them? Like, you know?
No, they weren't heavy enough for us.
I know.
I mean, there's some cracking tracks. But I mean, I got had an argument with a couple of my brother's friends on his stag do in Amsterdam about whether or not Use Your Illusion 1 or whatever it was the best album of all time, which I argued it wasn't. But I was distinctly argued down. Yeah.
See, I have time for Use Your Illusion 2.
Or was it? Maybe it was the Appetite for Destruction one. I can't remember which.
Appetite for Destruction is the one that everyone says is arguably the greatest rock and roll album ever.
Must have been that.
With like Welcome to the Jungle and Rocket Queen and you know Sweet Child of Mine and you know. The Use Your Illusion 1 was the one that was all orange. Use Your Illusion 2 is the blue one that has the Kenneth.
The blue one was better.
The Kenneth Williams "You Could Be My Eye." Remember it? It sounded like
I quite like that.
It was old Kenneth Williams doing the soundtrack there, wasn't it? Or at least it did to You and I for a moment there.
Yeah, it's given the stuff Metallica were putting out at the time, there was better stuff to be had. But that is personal choice.
Yeah,
there's nothing wrong with the albums. Nothing wrong with the albums at all.
So we've dithered around it up to now. I even put you off when you were talking about it after you went and picked it up. But this M2, how is it?
Yeah, I mean, I haven't really driven it much. Yeah, I drove over to Colchester and dropped the RS McGann off, and picked up the M2, and then drove it back. So a couple of hours of motorway work largely. And other than that, just sort of pottering about. So I've done a couple of little sort of blats on the odd B roads and stuff, but the true test starts Friday. So we're driving down to just north of Rheims or Reims if you're French, and then staying overnight there, and then we're driving down to Avignon after that. So I've got to tootle across the Côte d'Azur and then through the Pyrenees and then back up the middle of France. So I'll get a proper feel for it then. So far, I like it. I think the dynamics feel good. It's fast. It's turbocharged, so you've got a sort of usable lump of torque to make lazy, not really bothering to rev it. Progress rapid, but and then if you spank it a bit, there's plenty up at the top end. It doesn't get sort of full feral at the top end, but it does go. The performance exhaust, which I wouldn't have ordered because it was a ridiculously expensive option, is egregiously loud. But I got the impression from watching a few videos on YouTube that they were allowed. The standard exhaust is pretty bloody loud as well. So when you fire up if I was commuting and leaving every day at 5:30, I wouldn't have many friends amongst the neighbours pretty quickly. It's like, and then it sort of starts with the valves open, then closes them. as if to say like, I'm here, yeah, about as you were, you know.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, it's nice. It's got the tech side of it. I'm getting my head round. It's not much of it. I mean, it's BMW make a big fuss of it. You've got an app and all these other things you can do, and there's some fancy bits and bobs. But on the other hand, it's a 2016 or 2017 car, so you have to remember that because the tech's a bit old. So yeah, there's online stuff, but it's 3G, not 4G. Yeah, there's map updates that I've bought because the maps are from 2016, so I've updated the maps because I'm about to drive across Europe and I'll have the new ones, please. And that's not a ridiculous amount of money, and it updated to the 2022 maps, but you have to use a certain file system on your USB stick, and the USB stick can't be bigger than a certain size, and all this sort of faffing. Net, I had too big a USB stick, matron, and had to order another one from Amazon to arrive tomorrow. So I still haven't actually got the maps updated. So yeah, I mean, but as a package, I think it looks great. The respray on the wheels was a win, as it turns out, and yeah, it feels really tight together. I mean, so it'll be interesting to probably get it up into the Pyrenees and give it some beans.
The wheels, the gold wheels, total winner. Please, you did that.
Well, I mean, that also, I managed to scuff them like an absolute bell end, but nonetheless, not paying attention and not used to the fact that the steering is much more tight and direct, even though it's an electronic rack, than in the Megane. So, like, smack the curb gently, but still annoyed the hell out of me. But it also proved to me, because I spoke to a chap just to get a quote for how much he would charge to come around and redo the wheel. And he pointed out to me that that's not frozen gold, which is what I ordered. And what they said to me is, and I was trying to work out why it wasn't, because frozen gold, he described to me as sort of more 9-carat gold. And if you look on the pictures of the competition and stuff, that's what it looks like. So what they've done is they've just done a couple of coats of frozen gold straight over the top of the black and thought that'll be fine. So they've done a sort of quick and dirty respray. They've refurbed them and they haven't bothered to repaint them properly, which is why it's a much darker gold. But I mean, net is I like it. So, but it'll just be a problem to get the touch-ups done.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not surprised they didn't refurb the wheels, to a kind of a high standard. I follow this YouTube guy, Chop's Garage, and I see now Chop's Garage. He's in Devon, isn't he? So I should say Chop's Garage. He makes decisions about whether to refurb wheels based upon how much the car's worth. And, I see how much work it goes into turning an alloy wheel into, something that was as it was when it left the showroom. I feel this is somehow traditional, Gammy. This is almost a good sign that this has happened, because didn't you destroy an alloy wheel on your Nissan 350, indulging in some Dukes of Hazzard foolishness many moons ago? And wasn't that
estimating my talent as usual?
Yeah. Well, you never framed it like that years ago, but I realised now, thinking about it, that short wheelbase makes that car quite chicksy on greasy cambered British roads.
I just wasn't used to the car well enough, and was just doing a sort of small power slide around the corner. But I didn't know the car well enough, and was just rotated it too far around. So just spun it round, and it sort of dinked the curb on the left hand side and damaged the rear wheel. Not very much, but yeah, annoyed me. Especially when I rang up Nissan and said, "Can I buy a new alloy wheel, please?" And they went, "Certainly, sir. That'll be £1,000."
Yeah. That was a long time ago now, like 2008.
Yeah.
Or something.
Well, I've still got 3 spare Rays alloys in the garage, because I bought a set of 4 on eBay for £450. And the one that was got the dink in it is on my mate's wall as a hose holder in his garage.
Nice. All's well that ends well. So, which wheel was it on the M2?
Front left.
It's
not that too bad. It's just like mildly annoying to my pride, if nothing else.
Yeah, it's a bit like the missing chin spoiler on your Megane. It's kind of, as you said, it looks kind of rakish. I tend to agree.
Yeah, that one I wasn't too bad by that. I'm not quite sure where that happened. I think that happened in the Alps. Yeah, battle scars. That one's all right.
So whilst I was in England, I saw old John. He's still living up north, but is spending more time down south because of the job that he's doing now. He said to me as we were walking to the station, any thoughts about what I should try and drive? So he has at the moment for the family like a Macan Turbo S. Or it's not badged Turbo S, but apparently that's what it is. Which for the family, I see why you would do that car. It's a practical decision. I did get him to admit that he very much missed the C63 that he had some 2 or 3 cars ago, because I not really talked to him about cars since he got rid of that C63, because I just I don't see how you could have. I mean that's like trading in one of your children, isn't it? I could never have parted with a C. I've never owned a C63 AMG. I just know if I had, I never could have parted with it. But no. So this would be a second car. This might not be a lot of money. This might have to street park a lot. So isn't going to need to be too attractive to our light-fingered friends. What would you do? The advantage here being the budget is probably more than I might normally spend on a Beta, but probably less. Probably would need to be 10, 15-ish. What do you do for that? I said to him, I'd get as much Jaguar as I could for the money and just roll the dice on reliability. And he didn't say anything, which implied that had been deeply unhelpful.
Without having heard you say that before, I would have argued that is deeply unhelpful, to be honest.
Well, in England, there's so many lovely Jags. Here, they've all got mirrored wheels, and whereas you get good diesel ones.
Which models are you talking about?
I mean, this Chops Garage guy, he had a turbo diesel XF. That was like a 2012 or something. That had 450 foot-pounds of torque. I mean, I know it's a diesel, right? But that would have. I found myself. I can't. When I was in England, I almost reached out to him and said to him, "Can I have that car off you just for a little bit, and then you have it back?" But then I realised it would potentially be an even more difficult conversation when I'd blown it up at the side of the motorway and needed to explain to him and to my wife that I not got a car for the job that I needed to do. So I didn't take that any further and just rented.
Probably savvy. I don't know. So it needs to be what? 4 seats, 4 doors.
Not necessarily.
It's replacing a Macan S.
It's not replacing it. It's sitting alongside. It's an additional car for him to use commuting to and from the north. So, if it has 4 seats, great. But, if we could make a strong case for something that didn't have 4 seats, he might think about it.
Well, I mean, there's what was that? I found that Jag I was pointing out to you recently, didn't I? The with that XK 500 horsepower supercharged one.
Yeah,
that was like 9.5.
Yeah,
with 70,000 miles, but one owner from new.
Don't they do that in like a 5 Series size sedan? That's the kind of thing. That car would be a cheaper car to buy.
Yeah, you can get the XFR.
Yeah, that would be
Yeah, because they look all right. They got a nice grille.
I also said to him VXR8 or Monaro or whatever they call them. Either way, the Vauxhall version of the Pontiac GTO, Holden, Commodore V8, whatever, that GM thing. But the reality is they're a little bit vulgar, aren't they, frankly?
A little bit. I mean, I like them, don't get me wrong, yeah, but I'm a chavvy scumbag. They are not,
Yeah, they're unfortunately they have the kind of image that Capri
they are, yeah,
Capri's had in the 80s, right? The Capri's.
And when you're getting rinsed for nearly £2 a litre, do you know what I mean? It's
yeah.
you can sort of justify it in your mind if you're putting it into an AMG or an M car or something like that, or a Porsche. It's expensive motoring, but there'll probably be some sort of clever tech that means you can still scrape 25 on a long run. Not in the Vauxhall.
This tomfoolery with updating the nav, all of this is just, to me, feels like BMW. And I said to you, we over email we were talking that you need the forums. The only way,
I've been on the forums.
yeah.
But yeah, I mean that's where I got a lot of the information. And I mean, look, I'm a tech not aficionado. That's over egging it, but I'm a tech file, if you like. I'm keen, so I'm happy to sort of play around with it and read up on it and stuff. And yeah, I mean, look, it's got an internal hard drive. I still can't find out how big that is, but I mean, it's going to be 10 or 20 gig or something like that, so I can chuck a bunch of tunes on there before we head off. I'll get the maps updated. Yeah, I mean, it's quite fun to be able to play around and see what the weather's going to be like on there where you're going. You can do it like 3 times faster on your phone, it's got like, I mean, random tech that you think, well, I mean, I'm not that bothered, but it's sort of, I suppose it's sort of nice in the same way as having breakdown recovery is. There's a button for if you have an emergency. Like you see a biker go down in front of you or something like that. There's a button up by where the lights would be, up on the ceiling. To press for like SOS, and because you've got GPS in the car, you can they'll come over the mic to you and say what's going on. You can say there's a biker gone down or whatever, and they'll send emergency services. So there's little things like that that's quite nice. They do that on the motorbike, on the BMW S1000 and stuff, don't they? There's this little trigger thing on the thing that you can essentially call BMW emergency. And if you crash the bike, it's got a lean angle detector thing. So if it detects you've gone off the road, they call you, and if you don't answer, they send the ambulance anyway. So there's a sort of an additional wrap that you don't get with some other car. I mean, you've got Mercedes and so forth, but I've not experienced that before. Renault had some nice tech in the RS, but as I said to the guy at the dealership when I was handing it over, they spent the money on the oily bits, and I was very happy with that. So. Yeah, I mean, it's just a different experience. I'm sort of getting my head around it.
Yeah, I mean, my wife's car, she has a 2004 E46 325 with the Sport Pack. And the Sport Pack makes it, gives it the handling stuff, which is really nice. But I mean, it's an old car, but and we've had it for like 100,000 miles now. I'm still impressed by it whenever I drive it. I mean, you've heard me say that before, but yeah, the virtues of the car will come through the longer you own it. That's the point. So I think this drive, well, I'd like to know what you think after the drive. We'll talk again after the drive.
Yeah, I mean, it certainly feels, really tightened together. And there's no, the suspension is the suspension, but you can soften up a little bit when you put it into comfort, and the comfort makes it bearable. I mean, I've driven a lot of hard-ass suspension cars. That Cooper R was ridiculously hard, and I had 2 of those. So I'm not that bothered by that. And my long-suffering wife is aware of that. But it's enough, and the Sport Pack doesn't make it extra egregiously loud, but it really does feel urgent. And because of the way it's a 3-litre straight 6, but at 80 or 85, it's sitting at about 3,200 RPM. So it's kind of in the bottom of the zone where the turbo is about to kick up, because it's a twin scroll single, so it's ready to pick up about there. So you've got reasonable torque, although it's a little bit laggy below 2.5, but it's not slow. But when you lean on it, even in any mode, comfort, whatever, because it's just the same springs, it's not got clever adaptive suspension or anything like on the 3 or the 4. But it feels really punchy, irrespective. But I was worried. A lot of the reviews said that the low speed ride was painful. I'm not feeling that. And this trip will give us a good idea. And it's there was the I didn't realize before I bought it, and I'm watching a few videos afterwards about the difference between the N55 and it's not an S motor and this sort of like whatever. But it has got other stuff I learned, like it's got a double sump oil thing, so that if you're doing sustained high speed cornering, it's not gonna run out of oil and screw the motor. And the guy I saw whose video produced that, I can't remember what the gentleman's name is, but I watched it earlier on. Excellent video. Said that his buddy had just wrecked a 240 M Sport or 235 M Sport doing the same track work, but it didn't have that modification. So I think it is a genuine M car, and we'll see. Yeah, so far so good.
Yeah. Well, let's wait and see with that. Like wait and see how you feel about it after the trip. But I think it feels like a keeper. So I've been karting with the boy.
Oh yeah. How did that go?
Oh, dude, well, firstly, right, it's better to be having the conversation. Do you remember what Stoner was like, where every race he was like win or crash, and you were like,
Yeah.
well, he's obviously fast, but Jesus wept, right? It's great that I'm not having those conversations with Ollie. It's great that the conversations with him are, this is where you can make time. So we had like the track map out, and to his credit, he has consistently found time in each session, to the extent that he won his first race when we went earlier this week. So the lap record for the juniors is 32 seconds, and his fastest lap is a 36, which, as I say, was good enough to win one race, but put him ahead on the track, but second in the race, because the race is determined based purely upon who does the fastest lap. And this other lad did a 35-second lap, although he was hopeless in the rest of the race. Ollie's got really good, smooth lines, and has really begun to enjoy it. He most comes alive because he wanted me. He was very enthusiastic for me to do it. And dude, I'm such a child with it. I mean, when I sat in the car again, I'm absolutely fully psyched. And after about 3 laps, I realized that I'm like absolutely fully adrenalized. Like I'm taking adrenalized huge breaths, like, gas breaths. I've been gripping the steering wheel so tightly that my arms and shoulders are absolutely done. So I did 2 races the first time, and was faster than the other guys. And Ollie was most excited that, but then I looked at the adult lap record and realized I was some distance off that. So then began to really think about lines and what I could do. So I'm now 2 seconds off the adult lap time, which puts me in the top 100 people in California or something. I mean, yeah.
Nice cheapie.
Dude, it is nice when the guys at the place who run it are showing you a bit of respect. So that was good. I was also pleased that when I had to pass people who thought they were fast, I was able to just follow them for a little bit and figure their lines, and then just drive past them where they were slow. So it was like I wasn't like having to like Dale Earnhardt them. I could just put them.
Difficult to meet him again in the pits after you've dealt with
them. Well, these kids have no shame. I mean, I watched one lad go for a total like Senna at Suzuka on Prost gap that wasn't there on his sister, on his like 6-year-old sister, and put her like hard into the wall.
So, take that, biatch.
I know, it's like. I mean,
like, mind you, you beat up on those closest to you, don't you? I mean, me and my brother certainly used to reenact wrestling moves after the A-team on a Saturday afternoon. I mean, don't DDT me for real. Yeah, no worries.
Yeah. So that's been fun. Have you been following Mike Booth and his updates?
I haven't actually caught up with it for a little while, which I feel bad about. Actually, what's the latest?
Well, I noticed on Instagram there was a photograph of him in his wheelchair in the hospital. He's there is also, I'm not sure if you see it on 44 Teeth, the YouTube channel, there are a couple of videos now of his TT diary. So one is like up to the day of, and then the last one is, I think, the morning of. I've not watched all of that when I was watching a little bit of it this morning. But yeah, there's a complete documentary right up to the time when So yeah, he also, in the TT video, we're still there on his helmet. He does the pan around, and halvarandclarence.com is very much still there and in the shot if you know exactly which frame to pause it on, at least.
Well, I mean, look, it is what it is. I mean, obviously, I feel awful for him, but I'm sure he'll go on to impress us with like what he does next anyway, because he's that kind of guy. Yeah, I've ridden bikes for years. Bikes are dangerous. You get unlucky on the road, that happened to you. So you go and take a risk at a place like that. I'm happy to support you, and I wish him all the best. And I feel awful that it happened, and but it is what it is, and I'm sure he knew what he was going into.
Yeah. So, in a kind of a segue, does this count as a slick segue? Whenever I do emceeing at any events at the Black Hawk, they always say to me, "Oh, you always have a good way of segueing from one thing to another." So many of these scenes at the Isle of Man TT feature transit vans, and you and I last saw each other when you dropped me off at Basingstoke Station, and I rode down to Portsmouth to pick up a Enterprise rental van. Well, they gave me a new transit, and I did 1,300 miles around England in it, and absolutely loved it. Absolutely loved it. Is it me, or is it because vans are for people who drive a lot, that the actual business of driving and how it feels on the road, all of those things are like done right for vans? I feel like they're done right for vans, and in so many cars that I drive, they're just not, the dynamics just aren't there. Whereas vans, the dynamics are always there. I feel that they're good to drive. Maybe other vans that aren't Fords or Mercedes might not feel that way, but this was, the shifter was close to the steering wheel and was slick, just like the one on my Fiesta ST. I absolutely loved it. I did stupidly drive on a beach and get some stones caught up in it, and it started making a peculiar noise, and I ended up
You loved it, but you wrecked it.
Well, I was like, Jesus, this was only about 100 miles into the trip as well, because I did.
Were you in Wales?
No. So I started at the end, because obviously it's me, right? And I went to Hastings because I'd never been to the site of the Battle of Hastings.
Oh yeah.
And that's the end of, I was exploring I was in the footsteps of King Arthur, and I thought I would have a look at the end of the Anglo-Saxon period. So William landed in this place, Pevensey. So I went to Pevensey first, and then I drove round from Pevensey to Bexhill. And it was there that I drove on the Pebble Beach and got all stones up inside the transit. But a bit of heavy braking soon fixed that. So that was that solved the problem. And it stopped making the peculiar noise it was making and made me feel a lot better. But whilst I was there, in fact, whilst I was dealing with the stones that I'd stupidly scraped up into the front of it because I was driving too fast on the pebbly bit, I noticed a plinth at the side of the road that said that Britain's first motor race took place here at Bexhill. And I was like, what? But yes, that's the truth. In 1902, there was a speed trial on the seafront at Bexhill, right where I was, right near where William the Conqueror landed, and not very far from Hastings, where the battle took place. So the following day, I went to the place where the race was organized. It's a hotel now, and they have this like foyer, like interest point, which is all photographs and the history of the Bexhill trials. So I looked at all of the cars and was highly amused to see that the fastest car was a 60 horsepower Mercedes in like the last year it was run in 1906 or something like that, which is so it was like a run down the hill, and it was a really popular thing. And then when Brooklands opened, and Brooklands was in competition with it, kind of, when Brooklands opened, that was the end of Bexhill as a venue. Yeah. So then I went to Hastings, and that was quite cool. And then I did a lot of other Arthurian stuff. So I went to Winchester, where they've got the original King Arthur's Round Table. There's record.
That's after say, wait a minute. The original from what?
The actual King Arthur's Round Table, dude. No, you're laughing, right? They carbon dated it to the middle of the 12th century. So it was made up about the time that Le Morte d'Arthur or Bernard of Clairvaux, these like chroniclers who talk about Arthur, who made up the Arthur myth, those people, it was about that time at the table. And it's too small for like a bunch of knights to sit around. But at the same time, there's record of it being on the wall of this church in or court of law in Winchester. There's records of it being on the wall there in the 1300s. Some like traveller guy whose record that we have talks about it hanging on the wall even then. It was painted by Henry VIII when he had a couple of his children married off at Winchester. So I left Winchester having learned lots of interesting history, but nothing to do with Arthur. So then I went to this place, Cadbury Hill Fort, which they think is the site of Camelot. And it's basically, you and I. But, sorry?
Who are they? These are they people that think this.
Our historians.
Right.
Historians do. So
I was just checking it's not like Glastonbury people kind of thing.
The line between, what you've described as Glastonbury people and all I would say is, in a moment when I come on to Glastonbury Abbey and Arthur's burial site, there's considerable cause for doubt of the veracity of anything that you hear, but certainly Cadbury, the Iron Age hill fort, is an amazing hill fort, and no
doubt there.
A place where I feel like Camelot could have been. It was big enough to have a town inside. It took me 20 minutes to walk the perimeter of the earthworks. So what could have been inside was, as big as Uffington Hill Fort, not like a small kind of. So then at Glastonbury, I talked for a while with a man who had a Volkswagen van from Leeds on vacation and holiday, I should say. And we talked about how nice it was having vans, and I moaned about the size of British parking spaces, and he too said he thought they were unreasonably small, and I said, they needed to be bigger, and we agreed on that. And then I went and saw the place where Arthur was buried. Except they're not really sure about that because they moved the bones. And anyway, the bones that they dug up, they weren't really sure if they were Arthur's bones in the first place.
Well, that seems like a sure thing.
Yeah, which hurts the credibility of the whole like Arthur's burial site thing. Although the actual setting of Glastonbury Abbey, with the abbey in ruins, and in 1500 it was one of the finest libraries in Europe, and by 1550 it was completely gone. it was the ruin that it is now, all thanks to Henry VIII, who seems to have been kind of Trumpy as far as I can make out when it came to the
Yeah, that's
destruction
a good
of
point. I hadn't
the.
made that connection, but there was an air of Trump about the eighth.
Well, I won't. It was when I was looking at the picture of him at when we went round the Tower of London. I went round the Tower of London with my family, and I was looking at him, and it was the orange hair that made me think, and and the willingness to, upend tradition for what works for you and for the agenda right now, without wanting to make this podcast about
Yeah. No,
politics.
there's an expediency to both individuals. Yeah, absolutely. No, it's interesting because I mean, we're when we're coming back up from France, I was looking through things I wanted to do on the way past, and we've got to spend a couple of days driving back up. So we're popping into Amboise to get some of the patisseries that I like, because from out of time there 20-something years ago. The legend that is Bigot Pastries Millefeuille. Oh, gee whiz. But we're then popping we're doing the Lascaux Caves on the way up. But then more to the point, after that, we're doing the Bayeux Tapestry. So I wanted to do the walk, the War Museum and stuff at the Omaha Beach and that sort of thing on the way past. And in order to be there, you sort of over by Bayeux is the natural place to stay. So the tapestry's over there. So yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing that. So yeah, no, it's interesting because I saw the pictures of you at Hastings. So it's
Yeah. Yeah, well, I did went down to Tintagel as well, and that drive along deliberately drove along the north coast of Cornwall, and that was probably the most enjoyable part of the trip from a motoring perspective. I should say I told the GPS to keep me off main roads, so I stayed on A and B roads, and what I found was that quaint England of country pubs and narrow country lanes. I found that in absolute spades. I grew up in the south of England, lived there for 30 years, and saw a side of the south of England that I'd sort of not seen visiting as a tourist and doing this like crazy, like Arthurian thing. So the sum up on the Arthurian thing was I looked for Arthur, but I found lots of Norman history. And the Norman history was cool. And because the other thing I did, I went to the lake where the lady brought the sword out. Well, there's nobody there. There was nobody there. And then so I was there at the side, seeing if I could feel a spiritual moment. And then these farmers on ATVs drove cattle along, and the cattle like ran over the top of me. Because I had like nowhere to go because the lake was on one side and the fence was on the other side, and the farmers just like looked at me as much as to say, "F you, townie," frankly. So the spirit. So there was a little bit of and there was me being all like, oh, because I saved the last of the comestibles that you left for me for there, and I was there, and the water was shimmering, and I was the only person there, and then it was, hey boy, come here, whoa, and then it was like revving engines, and then the cows were on top of me, and it was all a bit of a nightmare, frankly.
Yeah, that'd be a bit hectic. Yeah.
So we're into the home straight of our time now, Mark, and I wanted to talk about a couple more things with you before our close of play here. I've been very much enjoying diecast racing, and specifically this YouTube channel 3D Botmaker, and this is where he does exquisite dioramas, often by sponsors of the channel, and it's Hot Wheels that then race downhill courses, and you would really be surprised at just how good the racing is. I would go so far as to say, I've not been watching MotoGP recently, but I would much rather spend half an hour watching some 3D Botmaker diecast racing than I would any real motorsport now.
Well, I will give you that I have watched a couple of them. They are pretty good. I think you would be advised, if you were going to watch any current motorsport, I would watch World Superbikes. World Superbikes is an epic three-way tussle between Top Rack, Jonathan Ray, and oh dear, I can't remember the gentleman's name. He'll come back to me in a second. But yeah, the gentleman on the Ducati, it's just cool. There's some really good races at the moment.
So you say World Superbike's the one if I was going to return to watch. I like motorcycle racing because it's short. The whole Formula One thing, where it's the whole weekend and it's qualifying and all of that, I'm just like, whatever.
But WSB, you get a race on the Saturday, full length race, and a race on the Sunday, full length race. And they do some other like hyperpole qualifying and things like that. I'm not caught, so I'm a bit out of date with the rules and regs, to be frank. But it's exciting stuff.
Yeah. Well, I should pay tribute to Alain de Cadenet before we sign off today. I meant to say to you that I did that event with him, that front of camera TV show, and where we drove that 50s Ferrari. It was 13 years ago now, and after that day, the bloke never acknowledged me ever again. I sat with him in a car for all of that time, and ever since that day, he never spoke to me again. And I don't want to. I felt firmly put in my place and reminded of my status, just as Ollie did when the fast guys picked up bits of rubber from the track and threw it at him as they overtook him. Right, that was how he made me feel. But I do have two stories about him that when towards the end of the time, the car pulled to one side, had these terrible brakes, but it could still drift, right? It was a 50s Ferrari and it was balanced, and we were on Highway 33, and he had the thing full on Japanese, initial D spec drifting through these long curves, and he sang opera and sang it was, that was how the experience was for him. And I always thought that was a magical thing and something I was very lucky to be with him, to experience, right? Not just the driving masterclass, but also the fact that he sang. And the other thing I was going to say about him has, of course, slipped my mind. Oh, I know what it was. Nixon, great bloke. I shared first class with him on a Pan America flight just before he was president. Absolutely great guy. Could see nothing wrong with him. You're off to France. I'm fiddling around, getting ready for Pebble Beach. I'm still in the chairman's suite. Apparently, I've got my annual haircut lined up. I'm not sure if my razor's going to be up to taking my beard off, but I'm all lined up.
You're de-stubbling, are you? My word!
I'm all lined up for Pebble Beach this year.
Pebble gets more attention than your wife.
Oh, you know what? Yeah, you're absolutely right. It does. That's now you've framed it that way. I feel guilty. So I'm getting ready for that. I've spent this last week getting ready for a conference. That conference that I go to, the International Motor Racing Research Centre conference at Watkins Glen. I'm all set up for that, and I've semi-negotiated that I think I might be able to drive home from the conference. And I realized that the route, or you can if you take the southern route, it's basically the route of Route 66.
Cool.
So we'll see if I can negotiate that and make that come to pass properly. But that might be what I'm up to in November. So,
nice,
yeah. So, I won't say next week because it's not next week because I'm not doing these things weekly. But I will sign off now. Mark, thank you for your time.
Pleasure.
And and good luck in the Alps. And we shall reconvene shortly. Take care.
Cool. Cheers, man.
This episode has been brought to you by Grand Touring Motorsports as part of our Motoring Podcast Network. For more episodes like this, tune in each week for more exciting and educational content from organizations like the Exotic Car Marketplace, the Motoring Historian, Break Fix, and many others. If you'd like to support Grand Touring Motorsports and the Motoring Podcast Network, sign up for one of our many sponsorship tiers at www.patreon.com/GT Motorsports. Please note that the content, opinions, and materials presented and expressed in this episode are those of its creator, and this episode has been published with their consent. If you have any inquiries about this program, please contact the creators of this episode via email or social media as mentioned in the episode.